basically, let's just get stuck into it. How bad is it economically for the Russians right now?
It's bad. I don't even know where to start. You ask me questions, answer. But in general, I do an economic review every single week on Wednesday, and I start with these words. The economic train of Russia has arrived, and it's a dead end. So that's summing up the situation pretty nicely.
All right, everybody, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much. I'm kidding.
That's exactly what I say, by the way. I say, look, if you want very short summary, this is it. If you want more details, facts, figures, stick around.
Yeah, don't go anywhere, everyone. We are actually conversing properly. Konstantin just have I think a good understanding of each other's sense of humor. Maybe it's because of the Russian connection, but yeah. I mean, look, from my perspective, when Putin came out earlier in the year and said that the situation economically was a problem, that we're going to have to review how long this war can go on for, right, at the International Economic Forum in St. Petersburg. That was a significant deal. I made a video on that on July 1st, and it got very popular. And I think that there's this appetite amongst anti-Putinists, which is, I think, anyone of a normal persona, that the war's going to end not on the battlefield. You're not going to see the war won through incremental gains as much as they do maybe be a boost for morale or something. It's about inside Russia, about the economic conditions and the sustainability of the war machine, right? Would you still agree with that sentiment?
100%. I agree with that 100%.
Well, the point is that you expand on my points, right? You follow the Russian economy a lot more intricately than I do on a daily basis. So take us through some of the metrics that you follow and why it looks like it's creaking.
Okay, I'll try to explain Russian economy in very simple terms. Let's look at Russian economy as a household. Now, household has revenue and it has expenditure. And ideally, revenue should be more than spendings. And whatever you have left, you usually invest. And let's say that household income is more than spendings. And then for years, and wise members of the household, they take the leftovers and they put it in a savings account. And over 15 years, they accumulate a hefty amount in their savings account. And then all of a sudden, something terrible happens. Both members, one member loses job and another member starts earning half of what she earned before. And then they kind of go crazy. They start spending so much more than they spent before. They were spending before, okay? So, and what happens? They tap into their savings account. And they having a good time while the savings last. But then there comes point when they go to the bank, but it's zero. And then they earn so much less than they spend. And the bankers start knocking on their door saying, hey, time to pay the bills. Why didn't you pay? And this is exactly the point where Russia is at. Over 2 decades, Russia had accumulated a very large amount in savings account. And that amount came from exports of natural gas and oil. Okay, they did not spend all of it. Instead, they saved a lot. And here comes the war. So what Putin does, he instantly increases spendings for war, for military-industrial complex by a great deal. And then Russia is placed under lots of sanctions from the West. And it sells less oil and less gas, significantly less gas, at lower prices. So the revenues start declining. And the spendings grow over 3.5 years, and the revenues decline. But there's a savings account, and then Putin and his servants, they tap into the savings account. It's called the Fund of National Welfare. And that was enough for 3.5 years to cover the deficit. And now we're at the point where there's no money left in the savings account. There's budget deficit historically high. At this point, it's already over 5 trillion rubles, and this is just September. It's safe to say it's going to be around 7 trillion rubles. And I mean, Russia was in black all the time. It spent less than it earned for 2 decades, and now the deficit is just astronomical. And Putin cannot ignore this situation. And the first signs were when you made that video of yours, when Putin said that he didn't say anything about the war, but he said, we need to start cutting on the military expenses. And that was the very first sign. And then, of course, there was St. Petersburg International Economic Forum in July, where everyone and his brother came out and he said, well, you know what, we're in trouble. Recession is coming up. And, there were people from the Ministry of Finance, the ministers, people from the metallurgical industry, other industries. And all of a sudden, everyone woke up as like, people, we're in big, big trouble. And it's obviously, this is not even a trouble any longer. It's a catastrophe for Russian economy. The deficit is growing. Vladimir Putin called for an emergency meeting. He called for his top economists, top economic advisors, the head of central bank, the Ministry of Finance, the Minister of Economic Development, all these doves. There are hawks in Russia and there are doves. Hawks are the military-industrial complex and the military and the siloviki, and the doves are the money people. And they fight. There's a war going on between them. So this time, he listened only to the doves, and that was not a good meeting for them. I covered in a live stream, and they were not happy, and Putin was not happy, obviously. And it happened one day before he flew to Alaska. And there are messages appear in Russian propaganda now that they start preparing Russians for the bad times. Putin himself spoke in China yesterday saying that, look at the European countries, their economies are in deep recessions and things are not well there economically. That's how he starts preparing Russians. Okay? It's not because of the war in Ukraine our economy is down the drain. It's because there's a global event. Even rich, wealthy European countries are in trouble. And of course, we're in trouble also. We gotta tighten our waist belts and,
I'm not sure of the
and me.
recessions in Europe, I have to be honest. Yes.
That's what he said.
No, I know that's what he said, but I'm saying that for a recession to be existing, there has to be two quarters of negative growth. That's the common.
Pyotr, I agree with you. I agree. I mean, Europe is doing well, but that's not what Putin said yesterday.
It's not contracting. It's just not. Well, no, Europe's not growing. Britain is, I think, had a negative second quarter. But anyway, more the point.
But it's not catastrophe. It's not catastrophe. It's a normal course of things.
Yeah. Well, it's just about the. Anyway, you did say that he's aware of having to sort of relay the realities to some Russians, and that's sort of something that I wanted to get your take on, which is obviously the summer is coming to an end of dacha season, as it's known in Russia. People are going back to work. The days are going to become shorter, darker, all the traditional stuff. Something we have in common in the UK, actually. What's the perception going to be amongst the average Russian, right? You've got friends there. I've got friends in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Novosibirsk, Yekaterinburg, all over the place. And obviously there's going to be a growing awareness that energy prices are higher, food prices are not as low as they once were. Obviously, Russians absorb it; they're resilient, whatever. But take us through what you think could happen in this next period of time as the weather gets worse and Russians are more cognizant of the reality.
Russians are in for a very long and very tough winter, probably the toughest since 1990. I forecast big problems in Russian utilities. They're going to be breaking down a lot. The power plants, the compressor stations, the heat pipelines, and heat centers. If there is cold winter, usual Russian winter, then things are not going to be well. All of a sudden, and that's something unexpected by me, all of a sudden I see a big problem with food supply in Russia. I previously said that I never thought that Russia would see any hunger. I'm not so sure now. The situation in agricultural industry is horrible, absolutely horrible, and there are reasons for that. Lots of people, farmers, are at the front lines, dead or fighting. Cost of farming has increased tremendously in 3 years. Foreign spare parts, foreign technology, foreign machines are not in Russia any longer. Russians can't maintain, and simply the farmers can't afford new machinery. Okay, and the biggest problem is people, but second biggest is seeds from the Netherlands that gave high yield are forbidden. The Russians cannot buy them any longer. So, and all of a sudden, Russians find themselves in a position where their harvests of most of commodities are so smaller than before. Okay, of course, Russia can import, and it's become net importer of food. Believe it or not, I mean, Russia used to be the bread basket of Europe, probably one of the smaller bread baskets of the entire world. Now it imports more than it produces. The thing is, how much the imported food will cost. Imported potatoes, imported carrots, imported meat, Russians won't be able to afford. So that's another problem they're facing. Massive layoffs, massive layoffs right now. 60% of companies plan to cut on labor costs. That's the latest data from last week.